A narrator reached out to me after finding my stories on creepypasta.org. I usually ignore these requests, especially when they begin with, "I'm starting a new channel," because they often ask for my work for free. Sometimes, to add insult to injury, they're not even narrating but just using AI. I was going to close the message when the narrator followed up with, "You'll be paid a flat fee of $300 per story." That perked up my interest. "Why so high?" I messaged, and was informed that I would have to sell all rights to the story. It would belong wholly to the Scream Collector, the channel, and I wouldn't be able to reprint or repost anywhere. If I accepted the commission, a list of guidelines would be emailed to me. "How long do the stories have to be?" I asked. 2,000 to 4,000 words, they replied. The stories would be released in a kind of anthology centered around the fictional town of Pinefell. I was the first author contacted, but if the channel was successful, the anthology would be expanded to include other writers. The stories would all be published by the Scream Collector, or TSC as the name was displayed on the channel logo, with the conceit being that they were all true stories being shared by the titular collector of Pinefell. In short, I wouldn't get any writing credit, since my stories would all be penned by the collector. $300 per story was decent money, but selling all rights? Not even getting my name attached. I messaged back that I'd have to think about it. TSC said, of course, but not to take too long because they were contacting other writers, and I might lose out on the opportunity. In the end, I accepted because of the money, obviously. I mean, how many times had I let my stories be narrated for free in exchange for exposure? And how had that panned out for me? No, this time I'd take money. Given how stereotypical the channel looked, they only had one video, introducing the town of Pinefell with a spooky and obviously AI, voice. It didn't seem like I'd have much room for creativity. I'd just be writing formulaic, trope-filled, utterly generic creepypastas. I was sent a contract in standard legalese about what we'd discussed. I'd sell all rights for $300 per story to belong to TSC, the Scream Collector. After I signed and sent back the contract, they sent me the guidelines. This is where things got weird. I was asked to write the story in a Google Doc. I'd be sent a link to the shared doc, but I wouldn't be the primary owner and would have no power to change the settings or anything like that. The document would belong to the channel. I found this a bit controlling, but I was told since all stories were set in the shared universe in the small fictional town of Pinefell and had to have shared elements, and since I was giving over all rights and it would belong to the channel, they'd rather have it in their own Google Doc. Made sense, I guess. And they had some standard stipulations like 2 to 4K words, minimal dialogue, PG-13, mild swearing okay but no F-bombs. All pretty normal for a story that would wind up being used as a narration. But after this part, I'm just going to paste the rest of the guidelines here so you can read them. Write only in the Google Doc and not in any other document or file. You may only write in the Google Doc between the hours of 6 to 8 p.m. You may not make any edits or changes outside of those hours. Somewhere in the story, include the phrase, "Na siu oi phi hc taco tai rt." Do not speak this phrase aloud. Before writing, check your closet. While writing, be sure your door is locked. After writing, if the story is not yet finished, say aloud, "Scream Collector, do not come. There is nothing to collect." Then close the document. If the story is finished, say aloud, "Scream Collector, come and collect," and type FIN at the end of the document before closing it. This was all so bizarre. I mean, I assumed it was some sort of weird roleplay based on the channel concept, but the contract hadn't mentioned anything about it, so I messaged back TSC. These aren't real guidelines, right? You don't seriously want me to only write between 6 to 8 p.m.? TSC. The guidelines are part of a team effort for the universe we're making. So yes, everyone involved needs to play along, writers included. That's why we're paying such a high price, and you'll be expected to follow the theme we'll send for each story. Write between 6 to 8 p.m., follow all guidelines. You only have to be in character while writing. The rest of your day is yours to be OOC. That's why the limited time frame. So do you still want the commission? Why/N me? What if I break the guidelines? TSC. Your payment is contingent on delivering a story that complies with guidelines. If your story doesn't meet our guidelines, you won't get paid, or you'll be paid at a reduced rate, or otherwise penalized. Do you still want the commission? Y/N? In the end, obviously, I took the commission. And the very first story I was asked to write, ironically, was a rules story, the most popular kind on YouTube and the Creepypasta website. Here is the prompt I was sent. The protagonist is a visitor to an Airbnb in Pinefell who finds a strange list of rules. They disappear after breaking a rule. Their body eventually found dismembered in suitcases and lunchboxes hidden around a playground. Story should include 3 to 7 rules. See attached playground photo for inspiration. I opened the attached photo of an old, abandoned playground in tall grass with a bright yellow spiraling plastic slide. Ugh, I thought, a rules story, really? The most basic spaghetti of creepypastas. I finally came up with some rules after Googling pictures of Airbnbs and looking at some of the rules hosts often have for guests. I tweaked a few normal rules to make them seem just a little off, jotted them down, and was about to type them in the Google Doc when I realized it was only 11 a.m. Per the rules guidelines, I couldn't begin writing until 6 p.m. Such a stupid, arbitrary rule, though it seemed bad form to break it immediately, especially given the nature of the story I was writing. And I wasn't getting paid until I actually delivered said story. At 6 p.m., I was about to finally start drafting when I remembered the check your closet rule. Such nonsense, I grumbled, getting up to stalk over to the closet and fling open the door. My one-bedroom apartment has 2 closets. One with sliding doors in the bedroom, the other a coat closet in the living room. I guess the bathroom also has a linen closet, but it's so small it's almost more of a cupboard. Anyway, I checked all of them. Then I plunked my butt into my desk chair and opened the Google Doc, and then remembered the lock your door rule, so with a sigh I got up to check. But I generally always keep my door locked, and today was no exception. So I sat back down and started typing. The story came easily. I don't know if it was because of the 2-hour time limit or what, but my fingers flew, and before long the entire story was finished. I even included the phrase "na siu oi fiem hc ko tai rt" without any awkwardness. Just had it scrawled in a room in the Airbnb, adding to the overall creepy vibe as the protagonist settles in. Once or twice while writing, I spotted the cursor for another viewer on the Google Doc. Soon enough, I finished writing. I cleared my throat, rolled my eyes so hard they almost fell out of my head, and said aloud, "Hey Scream Collector, come and collect." I typed FIN. Instantly, the story vanished. The screen was just blank. The entire Google Doc wiped. I started to freak out. Not because I feared it was supernatural, I'd already seen the other cursor on there, but because my 2 hours of hard work, all those words, how could I prove that I actually... Just then I got an email. The money was in my PayPal account. I'd just been paid $300 for the 2,500 words I'd written. I also got a new message with the next prompt. A couple who are lost in the woods just outside Pinefell meet a skinwalker. At the end, only their skins are found. Attached was a photo of some generic pine forest along hilly trails. I sighed at the prompt. Not only another cliché, but a culturally appropriative one. Was every story going to be something off the top 10 tropes list? What next? A grizzled detective and some unsolved murders. A bunch of kids meet Slender Man? Still, money was money. The next day, I started writing at 6 p.m. after checking the closets and locking the door. I didn't finish the story though because I've never been a big fan of Lost in the Woods stories. I like nature. I find it beautiful and relaxing, not scary. Not to mention I wasn't sure what to do instead of a skinwalker. For now, I was going with generic predatory monster. But after getting halfway through the draft, it just wasn't creepy enough and I erased almost all of it. The time was 7:58 p.m., so I logged off. I fell asleep thinking about how I could make this Lost in the Woods concept genuinely scary, and around 2 a.m., I woke up with an idea. I went to the Google Doc and added a description of an unseen predator that devours the insides of its prey, leaving only the skins like the husks of fruit. I was pretty groggy, not fully awake until suddenly I noticed. The lines I just added were being deleted. Someone was on there, and they erased the words I wrote as I was writing. My heart thudded in my chest. Suddenly, I was wide awake. I remembered the rule about not writing except between 6 and 8 p.m. It had seemed like some sort of ridiculous roleplay, but the fact they were actually enforcing it, that was creepy. I closed my laptop and went back to bed. I just ended up lying awake wondering who was up watching the Google Doc, and why had my lines been deleted? Did that mean I wouldn't get paid? All the next day, I kept thinking of that other cursor on the Google Doc. It was there again at 6 p.m. when I finally sat down to write, popping in and out, though it didn't actually make any edits this time. Took me 4 days, but I finally finished the story. Not my best work, but scary enough, I supposed. I typed the last paragraph, describing the gory, discarded skins, the painted pink fingernails now stained with blood, and then I typed FIN, right at 8 p.m., and called out to the collector. And just like before, the story vanished, and money appeared in my account. Apparently my breach wasn't so terrible as to prevent my being paid. Though I did get a warning in my inbox, a single line reminder. Only write in the Google Doc between the hours of 6 to 8 p.m. Next came a prompt about some kids encountering a Slenderman-esque figure. Ha! Called it. Once again, I struggled with this common cliché. How to make it interesting. Maybe instead of a tall figure, I'd make the baddie short and squat, while still keeping with the disappearing kids theme. Unfortunately, even though I was eager to write, I had a lot of other things scheduled between 6 to 8 that week. When I messaged TSC to ask if the 2-hour window could be shifted, I was told no, but that I could take up to 2 weeks to finish the story and that would be fine. I was able to finish the story in the next week and got my payment. The next prompt was the absolute worst. I almost refused to write it. The narrator works as a security guard on the night shift, and strange things have begun happening. Oh, for crying out loud. Every other YouTube narration is about a security guard, always on the night shift, usually with strange rules. Between that and the FNAF franchise, isn't it time we bury this trope for good? And yet, the pay was fantastic for the amount of effort I was putting in, which was almost none. By now, the first couple narrations had already come out, with the third on the way, and the audience honestly seemed to enjoy the stories no matter how trope-filled and unoriginal. So fine. Whatever. I was kind of glad my name wasn't attached now, because if it were, I'd have had to spell it SELLOUT. But my hatred of all these tropes led me to rebel in a different way. I stopped following all the guidelines. For example, I refused to check my closets. Would I still be paid? And I began writing at 5:58 p.m. Everything I typed at 5:58 was erased, and I got another warning. But the checking the closet thing didn't have any impact. I realized nobody was actually watching me check my closets. I could ignore that rule and the door one. The only thing being monitored was the Google Doc. I started breaking the rules pretty regularly after that, just as a small act of rebellion. Even refusing to include the signature statement in my latest story, it got added in after I heard in the narration. I still got paid, but with a 10% deduction for forgetting the phrase. While I was writing these shittiest of creepypastas, part of me kept wondering, what's the point of having these silly rules? Why check the closet? Why call out to the collector? I still did this one, because I thought it was funny. What was the significance of the weird phrase I always had to include? If I said it aloud, would it summon a demon? I did say it aloud, and nope. Was it all just roleplay? Were the creators of Pinefell that invested in their little universe? I suppose that must be it. Eccentric, but then, plenty of podcasts have their own unique thing where listeners get to play along. All part of the fun. At least that's what I thought at the time, until I woke up one morning and saw a local news article in my Reddit feed. You have to understand, I'm a hermit. I avoid social interaction as much as possible. And since I work remotely, I rarely hear about stuff happening. Especially lately, I've been tuning out the world, and when I'm not writing or working, I'm playing video games or watching YouTube. My point is, I was kind of up to date on some national or even international events because of social media chatter. But local news wasn't something I paid attention to. But the article that popped up in my Reddit feed caught my eye because it was so sensational. A man's dismembered body was found in a suitcase and lunchboxes scattered around an abandoned playground. My first thought was, shit, was this crime inspired by my writing? That had been the very first story, and it had debuted on the channel a couple weeks prior, so it was definitely possible. I went to the narration itself and found that, while initially it had only a little over 1,000 views, it was now getting a lot more attention because apparently someone had noticed the connection to the news. I clicked a link to another article about the killing, and this one included a photograph of the playground where the suitcase had been found. As my eyes darted across the image, my heart dropped to my toes. It was a different photo, but the tall grass, the stained yellow plastic slides spiraling down from the playset, I recognized this play area. Fuck, I muttered. That was enough for me to reach out to the authorities. After reviewing the stories on the Scream Collector channel, the police discovered that there was a second story with striking similarities to recent murders. The bodies of 2 missing hikers had been found at a state park. Or rather, their skins had been found, piled beside the trail like husks of fruit. And what had stumped investigators was the fact one of the victims had nails painted pink. The sister-in-law of the victim with painted nails said she initially didn't believe it was her sister's remains, because her sister never wore nail polish, never. The investigators concluded the polish was applied post-mortem, but couldn't understand why. Now they knew. It was so that their bodies matched the details in the story I wrote. It makes me sick. I'm terrified they'll find more victims, children from the Slender Man story, or a security guard from the overnight shift story. And it's my fault. My words were the inspiration. Let this post serve as a warning. Be careful about accepting commissions. Ghosts aren't real and strange rules won't kill you, and most of what you hear in horror films or narrations isn't true. But I'm making this post here on Reddit, the so-called front page of the internet, to warn you that there are truly sick people out there. People who do their best to make horror stories become a reality. The Scream Collector hasn't been caught yet. I just want to forget my part in all this and get on with my life. Just pretend that I had nothing to do with any of it, but I know I need to share the truth. A warning. So I'm posting this here, and on our /writing and our /true crime and everywhere and anywhere to warn people of the danger. Oh, there's one more thing I haven't told you yet. That weird phrase I had to add into every story? Nasiu oi fi mhc tako tai rt. The one I got penalized for leaving out? The investigators pretty quickly pieced together what it meant. I feel so stupid for not having seen it myself. They're quite sure it was meant for them and for listeners in general and maybe for me too, and that it was a taunt by the Scream Collector. If you read it aloud backwards, it says, "Try to catch me if you can update, oh God. It's been 4 weeks since I typed this all up and I chickened out and didn't post it. But I just got a link to a new Google Doc and a message with a new prompt. Write a story about a serial killer who leaves clues in creepypastas." Eventually, investigators track down the clues to the writer. But when they show up at the writer's home, they find the writer already dead at the keyboard. See attached photo for inspiration. I open the photo, and it's a picture of my living room. Fuck me, I'm typing now. I've got the Google Doc open. It's currently 6 p.m., and I'm praying that if I seem to be typing like it's another story, the collector won't come for me yet. I've texted 911. I keep toggling between the Google Doc and this post. It's going live now. I'm broadcasting it everywhere. But fuck me, I'm wondering about those rules I thought were random. Like how the nonsense phrase was a hint. Try to catch me if you can. And I wonder if the other rules also hinted at something I've been too slow to figure out. I wonder why I was told to always check my closet.